Hi, my name's Marshall from MM4x4. This video today is showing you AutoMate in an NX Pajero. Alright, the first thing I'm going to show you is how to turn AutoMate on and off. You can see the LED switch here on the A pillar, and you can see the drive is just green D. If you turn it on, you just simply push the LED switch, and there you see now that the number 1 has been selected. So it's showing you that it's in drive mode, but it's also showing you the gear that you're currently in, so it does that all the time. If I switch to sport, I just move the shift lever across, you can see the drive goes off and back into AutoMate mode. Now the LED isn't illuminated because the torque converter isn't locked up. This is one difference with Pajero and the Challenger version. In the Pajero, the blue light always indicates when your torque converter is locked up. So what I'll do now is just drive off, and you can watch it changing gears. It's all been happening automatically. There's the torque converter locked up, so the blue light's on. So there you go, it's now changed in the 5th gear, we're in an 80 zone. Slow down, you can see it's gone into 4th, into 3rd. Torque converter's unlocked, it's still in 3rd gear. So it doesn't change down a 2nd, it stays in 3rd in this situation. And then as we accelerate away, it's changed down into 2nd. Torque converter's locked up. You're now in 100 zone. I'll just put my foot down a bit. Up to 100. There you go, it's changed in the 5th gear. Now I'm going to put the cruise control on. So you can see we're now climbing. It's changed back to 4th. Now cruise control's operating it at the moment. Over the rise, it's now changed in 5th gear. Now something to notice, if you look at the UltraGauge, you've got 2 temperatures. The top temperature is what we call the pan temperature, so that's one of the 2 temperature sensors in the transmission, and that's the big oil reservoir. The bottom figure, ATF, as it is on the display, is what we call the pipe temperature, and that's at the output of the torque converter. Now what you notice is that the blue light's on, the torque converter's locked up, and both numbers are exactly the same. What that's telling you is that the torque converter isn't generating any heat whatsoever. Now the moment I turn AutoMate off, which I'll do now, you saw the revs jumped because the torque converter's now slipping. You see the temperature, the bottom temperature is starting to rise, and that's the heat from the torque converter heating up, or the torque converter heating up the transmission oil. So you can already see there's a 10-degree difference. So those 2 numbers, the bottom number, the 88 degrees, that's the oil going out of the torque converter. It then goes through the transmission cooler in front of the radiator, then back into the reservoir. You see the reservoir is now at 76. You can see that we're now hitting 93 degrees. Now if I just turn AutoMate on, it's changed it down to 4th gear, it's locked the torque converter. First thing you notice is now the temperature's dropping down. I'm still climbing on this road, and you'll find they'll stabilise and be the same temperature. So that's the reason you install a torque converter lockup kit, because it helps manage the transmission temperatures, and it does it by not cooling the oil like an aftermarket transmission cooler does. It does it by stopping the heat being generated in the first place. top of the climb now. We'll just start descending. You see the temperature's the same. Now you'd think that with no acceleration, coasting downhill, that it would be good for cooling the transmission. Well, it's actually not. If I turn lockup-mate off, auto-mate off, see the temperature's rising. And that's while coasting downhill. So one thing you find is that once you actually get the heat into the transmission, it's really hard to get out again. Look at the temperature difference just by rolling downhill. So the torque converter is still creating heat. Again, if I turn auto-mate on, drop back down to the same as the main oil reservoir, because it's not creating any heat in the torque converter. Now I'm going to show you another feature, which is the 5th gear lockout. So you can see I'm in 5th gear at the moment, cruising, and sometimes in the hills, or if you're towing the van, you may want to just keep it in 4th. So in order to do that, you double click the LED, so double click, and you'll see the 4 flashed, and that indicated that your 4th gear is now the maximum gear it'll go to. So even if I go up to 100, you'll see it stays in 4th gear. To go back, so it changes in the 5th gear, double click it again, it toggles. See the 5 flashes under the D, and when it's going fast enough, it will now change into 5th gear. There it goes. Now, demonstrate a useful feature, and that is when you have your foot off the accelerator, it won't change down a gear. So I'm going to go to sport mode now, because we're heading downhill. I'm going to use engine braking, so I'm in sport mode. I'm going to drop it into 4th gear. Now I'm going to go back to drive, and you'll see it actually holds 4th gear, and it will stay like that until I touch the accelerator again, and then if it needs to, it will change into 5th gear. So I'll just do that now. I'll just touch the accelerator. There, it's gone into 5th gear. So I'll go back to sport. Engine braking now. Now I can leave it in sport and change gears, of course. Go back to 4th. But now if I move the shift lever across to drive, you see it's still hanging on the 4th gear until I touch the accelerator again. Another feature is the automatic control of the intensity of the LED. In these kind of conditions, country roads or highway cruising, quite often you drive with your lights on. And I'll do that now, turn my headlights on, and you see the LED's gone dim. So at night time, the LED's not glaring at you. In the daytime, it's a little bit hard to see. So what you can do is you hold down the cancel button of the cruise control, just keep it held 5 seconds, and there it's gone bright. So that cancel button toggles the intensity for daytime driving with your headlights. If I go turn the headlights off, you see it automatically goes bright again. Another feature is auto-mate integrates with the paddles, the flappy paddles here. Pajeros don't come with paddles. That's a product that we sell at our store. And if I just change it down to 4th gear using the paddle, you'll see it's now automatically gone into sport mode, into 4th. Now I can go to 5th using the paddles. Go back to 4th for a bit of engine braking. And I'll just pull over. And it also has the feature that if you've touched the paddles and then you go to stop, here, you'll see it automatically go back into drive once we stop. There you go. So now I can just accelerate off again. It's back to drive mode. basically there are three reasons to do it. The first one, the primary reason, in my opinion, is to keep your transmission oil temperature down. And as we've demonstrated earlier in this video, as soon as your transmission starts to slip, the torque converter starts to slip, the heat starts to increase. Now if you're towing something like a caravan and you're in conditions where the torque converter is slipping all the time, that heat, your sort of pan temperature, it just slowly starts to rise, and it keeps rising and getting hotter and hotter and hotter and hotter. You know, once you're starting to get over 120 degrees, you know, the transmission oil, you know, it's just starting the process of degrading. So by locking up the torque converter, you're keeping those temperatures under control. The second reason is by not slipping and not generating heat, you're actually using less fuel. So that blue light, I think of it as, whenever that blue light's on, I'm saving fuel. And it's also keeping the transmission cool. The other reason is just the feel of the car. You're basically turning it into a manual-like feel. So when you put your foot down a bit, it doesn't slip. It's more direct, and it's, in my opinion, a much nicer feel. Now I'm just going to demonstrate kickdown. So at the moment we're doing 90 kilometers an hour and 5th gear, and let's just say I wanted to overtake somebody, and you want to basically drop down a gear to get some more power. So I'll do that at the exit of this corner. So I'm just going to drop down a bit, it's about 50%. You see it dropped into 4th gear and up to 100. Now if you really want to accelerate hard, so doing about this speed, 80 kilometers an hour, if I drop the foot to the floor, you see it drops into 3rd gear and away it goes. So it behaves pretty much like a standard transmission. AutoMate is also configurable. The way you go into the configuration mode is you put the ignition on without the engine being started. Just wait for the lights to stabilise. And then you hold the on-off button of the cruise control for 5 seconds. And then you'll see the instrument cluster comes alive. Now the first parameter there is 100. Now that actually represents 1.0, or sort of like the mid-range. And then the first parameter is adjusting the shift points. So if you want to have more of a sport feel to it, where it shifts a bit later and it downshifts a bit earlier, you could increase it by using the cruise switch. So you went up to 130 or so, which is equivalent to about 1.3 times. And if you find that it's changing a little bit too early for your car, you can always make it lower. So it's changing at a lower RPM. So that's the adjustment. I leave it at 100, that's what I'm happy with. Press on off again, it goes to the next parameter, and that's the minimum gear that lockup starts. So that's 2nd gear. If you want to make it 3rd gear, increase it by 1, I'll go back to 2nd. I see no reason to take it off 2nd, but that capability is there. And then the other adjustment is the brightness of the LED. So if you look at the LED over here, I can decrease the brightness for daytime use, increase it, and for night time you can do the same. I'll leave it at 80, that's what I like. If I turn the headlights on, you'll see it will dim. Now I can again increase or decrease the nighttime intensity. So they're the configuration settings. That little flicker of the instrument, so it just tells you it's finished. There's also a diagnostic mode, so when you first install it, you press and hold the top button and it'll go into diagnostic mode. So the numbers at the so the first parameter, 2nd parameter, and you'll see the speedo's changing. It's like that number there's 80. 3rd parameter sitting at 112. 4th parameter, it's about 15. 5th one is about 25, 20, and the final one, 6, in this case is about 41. So that's going through self-test, and all you need to do is compare the values that you're reading in your car against what's in the installation manual, and you'll know whether or not you've wired it up correctly. I get asked, how does AutoMate actually work? Well, it's really doing 3 things. The first thing is it's reading all the information it needs to know about the vehicle off the CAN bus, and it gets accessed by plugging into the OBD2 connector. So it'll read things like RPM, speed, what gear it's currently in, all that kind of information. The next thing it does is it overrides the solenoid that activates the torque converter clutch. And the final thing it does is it actually changes the gears for you. Now the way it does that is, if you think of the gear stick and you go into drive, that's just a bunch of micro switches inside this assembly. So when you're pressing plus and minus and going between sport mode and drive mode, there are little switches. So what AutoMate does is it intercepts the harness that controls those switches, and the computer does that for you. So essentially, although you're in drive mode, behind the scenes the computer's actually going sport mode, plus, minus, and that's how it's controlling the transmission. So it does absolutely nothing to the software inside the transmission computer, and it's perfectly safe. So you can't damage the transmission because all the inherent protections, the built-in protections, are there. So if the driver was driving at 50 kilometers an hour and tried to go into first gear, the computer rejects the command. And same thing, if ever AutoMate was to do something similar, the computer just rejects the command. So all the inbuilt protection of the transmission computer is still there. So it's not touching the insides of the transmission computer in any way, shape or form.